Shattered Skies, written by Jim Cowie, published by Magic Quill Publishing. Shattered Skies delves into the cataclysmic events of September 11th, 2001. It is a compelling tale that weaves together the lives of diverse characters, capturing the unimaginable tragedy and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of profound loss. Prologue. In the heart of Lower Manhattan, a city pulsating with dreams and ambitions, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center stand tall as symbols of American prosperity and unity. But on that fateful morning of September 11th, 2001, those magnificent towers will become the epicenter of a horrifying and unforgettable tragedy. Plot, Chapter 1, the night before we are introduced to our key characters. Sarah, a young and ambitious Wall Street executive struggling to balance her personal aspirations with an impending marriage. James, a seasoned firefighter haunted by past traumas. And Malik, a Muslim immigrant trying desperately to prove his loyalty and assimilate into American society. The night before September 11th, 2001, Sarah sat alone in her spacious apartment, staring out the window at the dark Manhattan skyline. She was pensive, her mind racing with thoughts of her upcoming wedding and the demands of her high-powered job. In an attempt to clear her head, she decided to take a walk in Battery Park, the quiet oasis at the southern tip of Manhattan. The air was crisp and cool, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore was calming. As she walked, lost in thought, she noticed a figure sitting alone on a bench. It was a man, dressed in traditional Muslim attire, his face obscured by a thick beard. Sarah hesitated, unsure of what to do in the presence of a stranger, but something about him drew her in, and she approached him tentatively. "Hello," she said softly. The man looked up at her, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Hello," he replied, his voice thick with an accent. Sarah could sense a nervousness in his tone and wondered if he too was troubled by something. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked, gesturing to the empty space beside him. He shrugged. "Sure," he said, his eyes looking back out to the water. Sarah took a seat, unsure of what to say. But as the minutes ticked by, the silence between them became less awkward. They talked about the weather, the beauty of the park, and eventually their personal lives. Sarah learned that the man's name was Malik, and that he was a recent immigrant to America trying to make a life for himself in New York City. As their conversation came to a close, Sarah felt a sense of warmth towards the stranger. She wished him luck in his new life and offered him her business card, should he need any help or guidance. As she walked back to her apartment, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their chance encounter was somehow significant. Little did she know that their paths would cross again in the most unexpected and devastating way, only hours later. Chapter 2, Morning Dusk. The morning sun had just begun to rise over Manhattan as Malik made his way to work. He walked with a sense of purpose, proud of his job at the small deli on the corner of his street. As he walked, he noticed that people were staring at him more than usual. Some glared at him with suspicion, while others simply avoided making eye contact altogether. Malik couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness in his heart. He had come to America with big dreams and high hopes, eager to make a new life for himself and his family. But the reality of life in America was far different than what he had imagined. He had experienced hatred and bigotry before, but never like this. It seemed as though the entire city was on edge, suspicious of anyone who looked like him, talked like him, or believed in his religion. Malik tried his best to ignore the stares and the whispers, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. As he entered the deli, his co-worker, a young Puerto Rican woman named Maria, greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, Malik," she said cheerfully. Malik couldn't help but feel grateful for her kindness. Maria was one of the few people in the city who had shown him any sort of compassion. He smiled back at her, feeling a sense of camaraderie, but their moment of peace was short-lived. Suddenly, the sound of an explosion shook the entire building, followed by a deafening roar. Malik's heart raced as he realized what was happening. He ran outside, his eyes fixed on the impossible sight of the Twin Towers engulfed in flames. The air was thick with smoke and dust, and the sound of sirens and chaos filled the air. Malik watched in horror as people jumped from the burning buildings, their bodies falling like rag dolls. He felt a hand on his shoulder and he turned to see Maria, her face contorted with fear. "We have to go," she said, grabbing his arm. "We have to get out of here." Malik nodded, his mind racing with fear and confusion. He followed Maria as they ran out of the deli and into the chaotic streets. People were screaming and running in every direction, and the sound of emergency vehicles filled the air. As they made their way through the crowd, Malik saw a group of firefighters rushing towards the towers. He recognized one of them as James, the firefighter he had met on a call a few weeks ago. Malik felt a sense of relief at the sight of a familiar face, but also a deep sense of sadness. He knew that James and his fellow firefighters were running towards almost certain death, but he also knew that they were doing it to save lives. Malik felt a sense of conflicted emotions, unsure of what to do or how to feel. As he and Maria made their way towards safety, Malik couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness. He watched as the towers continued to burn, the smoke and flames rising higher and higher into the sky. He thought of the people trapped inside, the ones he had seen jumping from the buildings to escape the inferno. Malik had always believed in the goodness of people and in the promise of America. But in that moment, he couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal. How could a country that promised freedom and opportunity treat him and his fellow Muslims with such suspicion and hatred? As he made his way to safety, Malik knew that his life would never be the same. The events of that day had shattered his world, and he could only hope that someday things would get better. Chapter 3: The Descent. The attacks unfold with horrifying precision as planes crash into the Twin Towers, sending shockwaves reverberating through the city. Chaos ensues, and our characters are thrust into a world of unspeakable terror and loss. Sarah finds herself trapped amid the crumbling towers, James races toward Ground Zero to save lives, and Malik becomes the victim of racial profiling. As Sarah stood frozen amidst the chaos, she watched in horror as the Twin Towers collapsed in on themselves. The debris rained down on her, causing her to stumble and fall to the ground. She felt herself being lifted up by a pair of strong arms, and she looked up to see a group of firefighters, led by James, rushing her to safety. Sarah clung to James as they made their way out of the rubble and into the safety of an ambulance. Her mind was reeling with the thought that just moments ago she had been staring out at those same towers from her apartment window. As they raced towards the hospital, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt. She had been so consumed with her own ambitions and personal life that she had failed to realize the true magnitude of the tragedy that was unfolding. Meanwhile, James was racing towards the heart of the disaster, determined to do everything in his power to save lives. He had seen the horrors of war and trauma in his time as a Marine, but nothing could have prepared him for the devastation he witnessed that day. As he made his way towards Ground Zero, James saw the faces of his fellow firefighters, the ones he had laughed and joked with just hours before. They were now covered in ash, their eyes haunted with the knowledge of what they had seen and experienced. But despite the chaos and the danger, James refused to give up. He knew that every second counted and that he had to act fast if he wanted to make a difference. He raced into the burning buildings, his body aching from the heat and the smoke. He heard the screams of those trapped inside, and he felt the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. But as he emerged from the rubble, carrying a young child in his arms, he felt a sense of pride and relief. He had saved a life, and that was all that mattered. Meanwhile, Malik was feeling the brunt of the tragedy in a different way. As he walked towards his apartment, he saw a group of police officers staring at him with suspicion. He immediately knew what was going on. His skin color and his Muslim faith were making him the prime suspect of the attack. Malik tried to explain himself, but the officers wouldn't listen. They handcuffed him, threw him into a police car, and drove him to the station. He was interrogated, searched, and questioned for hours on end. Malik knew he had nothing to do with the attacks, but the officers didn't believe him. They accused him of lying, of being involved with a terrorist group, and of being a threat to America. Despite his pleas and his innocence, Malik was treated like a criminal. The officers were rough with him, and he was forced to spend the night in a cold and damp cell. As he sat there, alone and afraid, Malik couldn't help but think about his family. He knew that they too were being targeted, and he could only imagine the fear and pain they were experiencing. Malik was released the next morning, with the officers admitting they had no evidence against him. But the damage had been done. Malik had experienced firsthand the bigotry and racism that he had heard about, and it had shattered his faith in the American dream. He knew that his life in America would never be the same, and he wondered if he could ever truly feel safe or accepted in this country. As he walked out of the station, he saw the smoke and rubble in the distance. A constant reminder of the tragedy that had struck the heart of America. Malik didn't know what the future held, but he knew that he would never forget the events of that day. It was a day that had changed the course of history and the lives of countless people. And for Malik, it was a day that had shattered his innocence and his faith in the promise of America. Chapter 4. Broken Bonds. In the aftermath, Sarah struggles to survive in the debris, relying on her sheer willpower and the unexpected help of others. James faces unimaginable horrors as he battles to save lives in the midst of the heart-wrenching chaos. Meanwhile, Malik grapples with betrayal and the gut-wrenching reality of his new reality. As Sarah lay amid the rubble and debris, she felt a sense of hopelessness. She had managed to survive the initial collapse, but now she was trapped, her body broken and her mind reeling with pain and fear. But then she heard a voice calling out to her. It was a man's voice, strong and confident, and it filled her with a sense of relief. She called out to him, and he responded, telling her to stay calm and to hold on. Sarah felt his hands on her, lifting her up and carrying her towards safety. She couldn't see his face, but she knew that he was a stranger, someone who had risked his own life to save hers. As they emerged from the debris and into the open air, Sarah felt a sense of gratitude and awe. She looked up at the stranger's face, and she saw a kind smile and a pair of bright blue eyes. They didn't exchange words, but Sarah knew that she would never forget this man. He had shown her that even in the darkest of times, there were still people who were willing to help others. Meanwhile, James was in the thick of the chaos, battling against the flames and the smoke to save as many lives as possible. He had witnessed the collapse of the towers and the destruction that had followed, but he refused to give up. As he made his way through the rubble, he saw the faces of those he had lost, the ones who had sacrificed themselves to save others. He felt a sense of sadness and anger, but also a deep sense of pride. He knew that they had died as heroes, and that their sacrifice would never be forgotten. James continued to work tirelessly, his body aching and his lungs burning. He heard the cries of those trapped inside, and he saw the fear and desperation in their eyes. But he refused to give up, knowing that every life he saved was a victory. Meanwhile, Malik was struggling to come to terms with the reality of his new life. He had always believed in the promise of America, but now he felt betrayed and abandoned. The racial profiling and bigotry he had experienced had shaken him to his core, and he wondered if he would ever truly feel like he belonged in this country. He thought about his family, and he knew that they too were feeling the same pain and fear that he was. Malik tried to distract himself by volunteering at a local mosque, helping those who had lost loved ones in the attacks. But even there, he felt the weight of suspicion and hatred as people gave him side glances and avoided him. He knew that he couldn't give up, that he had to fight for his right to exist in this country, but it was a battle that seemed insurmountable. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, Sarah, James, and Malik all struggled to come to terms with the aftermath of the attacks. They had each been affected in different ways, but they all shared a sense of loss and confusion. For Sarah, the experience had made her reevaluate her priorities in life. She had realized how important it was to cherish the moments with loved ones and to appreciate the little things in life. She had started volunteering at a local charity determined to make a difference in the world. James had been hailed as a hero for his bravery during the attacks, but it had come at a cost. He had seen things that no one should ever have to see, and the memories haunted him every day. He struggled with PTSD and survivor's guilt, but he refused to give up. He sought help and support from his fellow firefighters and his family, determined to overcome his demons. Malik had faced discrimination and racism his entire life, but the events of 9/11 had amplified the intensity of it. He had lost his job and his sense of security, and he felt like an outsider in his own country. But he also found strength in the support of his community, and he began to speak out against Islamophobia and bigotry. He became an activist, determined to fight for justice and equality for all. Even though their paths had diverged, Sarah, James, and Malik all shared a common bond. They had each been forever changed by the events of that fateful day, and they had each found their own ways to cope and to heal. As they looked out at the city that had been scarred by tragedy, they knew that it would never be the same. But they also knew that there was hope for a better future, a future built on compassion, empathy, and unity. They would never forget the past, but they would also never give up on the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Chapter 5, Rising Ashes. Against all odds, Sarah emerges from the depths of destruction, profoundly changed. James, fueled by grief and determination, finds an unexpected ally to aid him in his rescue efforts. Malik must navigate a fractured world filled with discrimination, searching for a glimmer of hope amidst the ruins. Sarah emerged from the destruction a different person. The experience had shattered her in ways she never thought possible, but it had also given her a newfound sense of purpose and strength. She refused to let the tragedy define her, and instead she began to live life with a fierce determination. She became an advocate for victims of disaster, working tirelessly to provide aid and support to those who had lost everything. She traveled the world, volunteering for humanitarian organizations and helping to rebuild communities that had been devastated by natural disasters and conflicts. Sarah knew that she would never forget the events of 9/11, but she had also learned that life was precious and fleeting. She vowed to make the most of every moment and to live a life filled with compassion, empathy, and love. Meanwhile, James had found an unlikely ally in his rescue efforts. A young girl, no more than 10 years old, had appeared out of nowhere and had offered to help him search for survivors. At first, James had been skeptical, but he soon realized that the girl had an uncanny ability to locate people in the rubble. They worked together, crawling through the twisted metal and concrete, calling out for survivors. And even when they found no one, the girl refused to give up. She pushed James to keep going, to keep searching for those who might still be alive. As they worked, James began to see the world in a different light. He saw the resilience of the human spirit, the power of hope and determination. He knew that he couldn't save everyone, but he also knew that he had to keep trying. And so, he and the girl continued their search, moving through the rubble with a sense of purpose and urgency. Meanwhile, Malik had found himself navigating a fractured world filled with discrimination and hatred. He had faced prejudice his whole life, but now it was intensified, and he felt like he was constantly under attack. But even in the midst of the chaos and pain, Malik refused to give up hope. He found solace in his faith and in the support of his community. He joined organizations that fought against discrimination and bigotry, speaking out against hate and intolerance. Malik knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but he was determined to fight for justice and equality, not only for himself, but for all those who had been marginalized and oppressed. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, Sarah, James, and Malik continued to rise from the ashes of destruction. They had each found their own paths, but they shared a common goal: to create a better world, a world where compassion and kindness triumphed over hate and fear. They knew that it would be a long and difficult journey, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had the support of a global community that refused to give up on the promise of a brighter future. And so they marched forward, each step a testament to their resilience and strength. They refused to be defined by the tragedy of the past, and instead they worked tirelessly to build a better tomorrow. As they looked out at the city that had been scarred by tragedy, they saw a glimmer of hope in the rising sun. They knew that it would take time, but they believed in the power of humanity's collective spirit to rise from the ashes and rebuild. And so, they continued on their journey, fueled by the memories of the past and the promise of a brighter future. Together, they knew that they could conquer anything, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Chapter 6, Redemption and the Aftermath. As the city mourns its losses, our characters embark on an emotional journey toward healing and redemption. Their lives intersect as they confront their fears, forge unlikely alliances, and discover the strength within themselves to rebuild their shattered lives and find solace in unexpected places. The city was still reeling from the aftermath of 9/11, but our characters had each found their own ways to cope with the tragedy. Sarah continued her work as a humanitarian, traveling the world and providing aid to those in need. James had left the fire department and had become a therapist, helping others heal from trauma and grief. Malik had become an activist, fighting against discrimination and promoting unity and understanding. Their lives intersected as they each struggled with their own personal demons. Sarah found herself haunted by memories of the tragedy and struggled with survivor's guilt. James had never fully recovered from the trauma he had experienced during the rescue efforts, and he still had nightmares about those he had not been able to save. Malik continued to face discrimination and bigotry, and he sometimes wondered if his fight for equality would ever truly be won. But as they each worked through their pain and struggles, they began to come together in unexpected ways. They found solace in each other's company, and they discovered a newfound sense of hope and redemption. Sarah reached out to James, knowing that he had been struggling with PTSD and survivor's guilt. Together, they talked about the tragedy and the impact it had on their lives. James found comfort in Sarah's words, and he realized that he was not alone in his struggle. Malik also reached out to Sarah and James, knowing that their shared experiences could help him navigate the discrimination and bigotry he faced every day. They formed an unlikely alliance, working together to promote unity and understanding in their community. As they continued on their journey toward healing and redemption, they discovered that the tragedy of 9/11 had not only shattered their lives, but also brought them together in unexpected ways. They found strength in their shared experiences, and they refused to give up on the promise of a better tomorrow. And so, they continued to work toward a future built on compassion, empathy, and love. They knew that it would not be easy, but they believed in the power of their collective spirit to create a world where hate and fear had no place. As the city slowly began to rebuild, they found solace in the small moments of beauty and connection. They watched as new buildings rose from the ashes, and they saw the resilience of the human spirit in the faces of those who had lost everything but still refused to give up. And even as they faced new challenges and struggles, they knew that they had each other to lean on. They had formed a bond that transcended the tragedy of 9/11, a bond built on empathy, compassion, and hope. As the years passed, Sarah, James, and Malik continued to work toward a better tomorrow. They knew that the wounds of the past would never fully heal, but they also knew that they could use their experiences to create a brighter future. And so they marched forward together, each step a testament to their resilience and strength. They refused to let the tragedy define them, and instead they chose to define themselves through their actions and their commitment to building a world filled with love and understanding. As they looked out at the city that had been scarred by tragedy, they saw a city that was slowly but surely rising from the ashes. They saw a city that was filled with people who refused to give up on the promise of a better tomorrow. And they knew that they were a part of that promise. They were a part of the hope that was slowly but surely bringing the city back to life. And as they walked through the city, they saw the faces of the people they had helped, the people they had brought hope to in their darkest moments. They saw the faces of the survivors and the families of the victims, and they knew that their work was far from over. But they also knew that they were not alone. They knew that there were millions of people around the world who stood with them, who believed in the power of humanity to rise from the ashes of disaster and rebuild. And so, they continued their journey, fueled by the memories of the past and the promise of a brighter future. Together they knew that they could conquer anything, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they walked through the city, they noticed a group of people gathered around a makeshift stage in a small park. Curious, they made their way over to see what was going on. As they approached, they saw a young woman on stage, her voice soaring as she sang a song about hope and resilience. The crowd was mesmerized, many with tears in their eyes. Sarah, James, and Malik looked at each other, knowing that this was a moment they would never forget. They joined the crowd, listening to the woman's beautiful voice as she sang of the city's strength and determination. In that moment, they felt the weight of their own struggles lift as they were reminded of the power of music and community. They knew that they were a part of something bigger than themselves, a part of a movement that was bringing people together in the face of tragedy. As the song ended, the young woman stepped off the stage and the crowd erupted in applause. Sarah, James, and Malik looked at each other, smiling through their tears. They knew that they still had a long journey ahead of them, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had the support of a community that refused to give up on the promise of a brighter future. And so they continued on their journey, each step a testament to their resilience and strength. They walked together, united in their shared experiences and their determination to build a better world. And as they walked, they sang the words of the young woman's song, their voices ringing out through the city, a powerful reminder that hope and love can conquer even the darkest of tragedies. Epilogue. Shattered Skies is not just the story of tragedy, it is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It explores themes of love, loss, unity, and the profound impact of one of the darkest days in American history. Through captivating storytelling, readers will witness the extraordinary courage and the indomitable will of individuals thrust into an extraordinary and devastating event. But more than that, Shattered Skies is a story of redemption, of the power of community, and of the human capacity to rise from the ashes and rebuild. It is a reminder that tragedy can bring people together, and that hope and love can conquer even the greatest of challenges. Sarah, James, and Malik continued to work toward a better tomorrow long after the city had rebuilt itself. They remained committed to promoting unity and understanding, and their work had a profound impact on the world around them. In the years that followed, they watched as the world slowly but surely began to heal from the wounds of the past. They saw new alliances forming, old wounds being healed, and a newfound sense of hope and optimism spreading throughout the world. And they knew that they had played a small part in that transformation. They had each contributed something unique and valuable to the cause, and together they had created a movement that would continue to inspire and empower people for generations to come. As they looked back on their journey, they were grateful for the unexpected connections and bonds they had formed. They knew that they had been through something that few people could understand, and yet they had found a way to come together and support each other in their darkest moments. Their experiences had taught them that the world was full of pain and tragedy, but it was also full of beauty, resilience, and hope. And they were determined to keep fighting for a world where everyone had the opportunity to thrive and live without fear of discrimination and hate. And so, they continued to march forward, each step a testament to their strength and resilience. They knew that their journey was not over, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, fueled by the memories of the past and the promise of a brighter future. Is this a true story? Oh yes, many times over.